بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. We are making progress, alhamdulillah, and we are moving now to the third week. Inshallah, the topic of this week is more about the history and the evolution of the science of the Maqasid. We want to touch the evolution in terms of human production of this science. So this science was evolving that in the history, and we want to have kind of touch on it and how it's coming to our time and still going through different stages of evolution in our time, I mean, in the future. So our speaker today, inshallah, is Hisham, and he will be presenting, inshallah, for the session of today. Welcome, Hisham, and go ahead.
Bismillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Thank you, Muhammad. Alhamdulillah, we're on our third week of this, series of Maqasid Sharia, and today, inshallah, we'll have a historical background about the evolution of this science since the time of Sahaba to our time, and we'll see some how this science was evolved during this time, and what is the application for today's science.
So Maqasid was practiced by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his companion, and we'll see some details and some examples about how they used it. Also, all school of thought, Muslim school of thought, and school of fiqh, from the four Sunni schools and from Shia schools, except for the letristic school that has a fundamental issues with this premises. There are many contributions to this science, to the Maqasid science, especially during the 8th century of the Hijrah, and we'll see some examples of notable scholars that have major contribution to this science. Only those who made original contribution and left theoretical framework in writing and their manuscript reached us and was printed will be discussed in this talk. So this talk is not we will not list all scholars, of course, that has a contribution, but only the major one, and that's because there's no place for all of them here. For all this contribution will be considered as Imam of Maqasid. And of course, a lot of contemporary activities in Maqasid right now. We'll see many scholars right now trying to develop this science at fullest. So before we start, I'm just gonna go quickly through the relationship between Maqasid and Usul al-Fiqh in its traditional aspect. So here, as we know, in Usul al-Fiqh, al-Fiqh is the application or the effort by fuqaha to apply Sharia in our daily life. And Usul al-Fiqh is a standard or a grammar, as we said, to the language, or a framework to make sure that the faqih doesn't go straight and is within the boundaries of Islam. As we know, the evidences that Al-Quran and authentic Sunnah, and also we have some other ones that then there's no general agreement about them, and most of them, the most interested to us is, for example, here we can see interest, which is maslaha, preference, istihsan, blocking the means, sadd al-dara'i, and customs or al-urf. And these aspects are, as we saw last week, are aspects of Maqasid. So there is an overlap between Usul al-Fiqh and Maqasid Sharia, and we'll see that a lot of scholars, Imam of Maqasid, that trying to renew the aspect of Usul al-Fiqh based on Maqasid Sharia framework. So here, on the left side, we have the traditional aspect of Usul al-Fiqh. So we have Quran or Hadith or Sunnah, authentic Sunnah, that as the main source of fiqh in Islam. So fiqh is the application for the fuqaha to try to put the text in a context and an application in the daily life of Muslims. Usul is the framework that trying to guide faqih and make sure it doesn't go straight. And maqasid is, as we said, it was a component also of fiqh. So that we're moving to the right side when maqasid become the framework of usul al-fiqh, and everything turned around maqasid, ibadat, ethics, worship, sharia, the whole sharia, life situation, social and political situation of Muslims. It's all maqasid should be the framework for it. So that's where we're moving toward, and that's what scholars are trying to build as for the future of this science. So here there was 4 steps in this science. We will talk about the inceptions of the origins with Kibar Sahaba, and there was the first birth with the Imam Juwayni, Imam Azzuddin ibn Abd Salam, Shatibi, Al-Ghazali ibn al-Qayyim. But the 3 first one are the main contributors of this of this theory or of this framework of Maqasid Sharia. We have a complete birth, as the Sheikh Raisoni called it, a complete birth with Imam ibn Ashur. And right now we're in adolescence, if we want to say it, of this science with, again, many contributors, Dr. Raisoni, Dr. Auda, Sheikh bin Biya, Abdullah Dibla, and Ramadan, and Tariq Ramadan, and many others. So with Kibar Sahaba, for example, the most illustrated example is Jam' al-Quran, is the gathering of Quran in one book. As we know, after Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam passed away, Abu Bakr, be Allah pleased with him, was engaged in a war with the people that defied authority of the central power in Medina, and he engaged in war with many other tribes, Arab tribes that they defeated. They were against the authority, and they held zakat from the central government in Medina al-Munawwar. So this war has as a consequence that many huffaz, many memorizers of Quran al-Karim were they passed away, they were killed, and they martyred in this war. And Kibar Sahaba, they were as we know, Quran, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam passed away, there was hundreds of Hafazat Quran, of memories of Quran, but also the Quran was written in scarred pieces. So Kibar Sahaba, they felt that there's a threat against Al-Quran Al-Karim, and many Huffaz are dying. So the idea came to put Quran in one book. And of course, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he didn't say anything about it or against it. So Kibar Sahaba, they use their mind, and they use their logic. Umar and others, they suggested that we should put the Quran in one place. And of course, there was a debate. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam didn't mention it, but it didn't say to go for it. So they come to a consensus that there is khair in doing so. There is a maslahah. There is a goodness for an ummah. And we can testify today that there was a genius idea at the time. Subhanallah, today the Quran is everywhere for 1.5 billion Muslims. So that was one of the main application of a maslahah in the head of Sahaba. So Sahaba understood that there is a maslahah. Whatever the maslahah is for Muslims, they can go and engage with it. Either even with something as holy as the Quran al-Karim, which is there is no specific guidance for Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam at the time. One of the other examples is Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in his time, he excluded horses, for example, from zakat, because at the time the Muslim society were poor, and a horse was considered just as a personal transportation for Muslims. Going forward to Umar ibn al-Khattab time, Muslim society become, or community become more, there's more wealth. So people were having more than one horse. And so the horse was not only a transportation, but it became a commodity or a wealth. So Sayyidina Umar, he changed the opinion to include horses into the zakat pool, because he saw that there is a change. There's a change in time, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam intent was not to exclude for forever, but it was a context. And when the context changed, Umar ibn Khattab has the idea to change it too. And it was a benefit to the Ummah because there is more money coming to the poor from opening the pool to more commodities. Going forward to the second, third Hijri time, we start seeing a lot of Muslim scholars, at least from where we got right now, because there's a written record that we have, or written books. So with Hakim al-Tirmidhi, Abu al-Hasan al-Amiri, Abu Bakr al-Qaffal, all these early scholars from the second, third Hijri time, they will start mentioning in their book and in their writing about maqasid, salatu wa maqasid, praise and its objectives. Mahasin Sharia, for example, the Abu Hassan al-Amiri, which is the benefit of Sharia. So we start seeing this word coming into the writing until the Juwayni, Imam al-Juwayni time. So we can see here that early Muslim scholars, they were engaged into thinking about at least some aspect of Maqasid Sharia in ibadat or in general. So we'll start with the first Imam that we believe that has a major aspect of contribution in Maqasid Sharia, which is Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni. Imam al-Haramain, his the complete name, Diya ad-Din Abdul Malik ibn Yusuf al-Juwayni. He's from a Shafi'i school of fiqh, and his one of his disciples are Imam al-Ghazali, that we all know. Imam al-Juwayni is a major contributor in Maqasid Sharia. So in his book, Ghiyat al-Umam fi Tayat al-Dhulam, al-Burhan fi Usul al-Fiqh, this is his major thesis about Maqasid Sharia. His main contribution in this book was about three main contributions. The first one, he alluded to that clearly, that Sharia has as an objective to seek benefit and to avoid harm. And then in his book in Arabic, he said that al-aghrad al-daf'iyya wal-naf'iyya, which is really the same as Jadl al-Masalih wa Dar al-Manfa'at, as Dr. Risoni said last week. So that he was the first to have a written as clearly as that the main Sharia objective is to seek benefit for Muslims and to avoid harm from them. And that was one of the main contribution to it. The second contribution from Imam al-Juwayni is he's the one who came up with Taqsimat Talat, which is the categorization of maqasid in three levels, which are as we said last week, it was the necessity, the daruriyat, needs, al-hajiyat, and luxuries, al-tahsiniyat. And he went further for the daruriyat, and he made them as khas and am, which is khas mainly for the individuals and am for the ummah. And he made the same categorization for al-hajiyat or needs as the am and khas. And this contribution is still used as of today. One of the major application of this khas and am, especially for hajiyat, for the needs, are one the famous fatwa about the interest in the West, because buying a house or need for a house become a general am, a general need for the community. So it raised to when it's am, it raised to it became a daruri, it became a necessity for the community. And Imam Juwayni has this major contribution to make general needs can reach the level of personal necessities. And this is one of his main contribution in Maqasid Sharia. Okay. So we move on to Imam Al-Izz ibn Abd al-Salam. He lived between 539 and 632. Most of his life he passed. He's from Sham, but most of his life he was installed in Egypt. And this Imam has a major contribution to Maqasid al-Sharia in his book شجرة المعارف قواعد الأحكام في مصالح الأنام, which he indicate based on the verse of Quran, chapter 16 and verse 90, Surah Al-Nahl, when he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala summarized Maqasid Sharia in this ayah. And I'm gonna, Surah Al-Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to Imam Al-Izz ibn Salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala summarized all the benefit in justice, in doing good, in keeping close to our kinship, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always forbidden all transgressions against oneself, against others, inside the heart ones and the the physical ones, physical harms. So Imam Izz ibn Salam, he said that in this ayah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala summarized Maqasid Sharia in all aspects. Also, Izz ibn Abd al-Salam, he is the first and record Imam that said that the Maqasid Sharia doesn't apply only to mu'amalat, to ibadat and mu'amalat, but to transactional aspect of life, but also to the creed, which is Iman and ethics, and that's he was one of the first innovative in this field. And as of today, there's few imams or ulama that especially on the creed side, and that they put forward this theory that the Maqasid should include ethics and creed. Also, in his books قواعد الأحكام في مصالح الأنام, he went into details, balancing between interest and harm. He went in great length in his book how to balance between them, and when there's a conflict between interest and harm, what is the path for it. The next Imam, we're moving forward now from for the 5th Hijri, 4th Hijri to the 8th Hijri with Imam Shatibi. Imam Shatibi is an Andalusian Sunni legal scholar from the Maliki madhab, and he's considered the first Imam who tried to put the whole theory of Maqasid together in his book Al-Muwafaqat. Imam Shatibi, one of the first Imam who considered a very specific way that objective of Sharia is a part of Usul Fiqh. So as we said, Usul al-Fiqh was considered as the main framework for faqih to make sure that he got his fatwa right. But Imam Shatibi is one of the first Imam that said Usul fiqh is not enough for the faqih. He has to understand the Maqasid Sharia, and Maqasid Sharia is a part of Usul fiqh. So it's not something just that is a mandatory to have objective of Sharia part of Usul fiqh. In his book Al-Muwafaqat, Imam Shatibi was the first Imam who considered that Mujtahid has to have a significant knowledge of it before he can issue an opinion. Also, Shatibi contribution, and this is a brilliant from him, is he tried to have a scientific way to come to the conclusion that Maqasid Sharia is a part of the text when you look at it in its entire from text. I mean the Quran and Sunnah and he used manhaj al-istiqra' to go through it, which is the deduction. And he said that you have to go through all the Quran text and all the Sunnah text, and you will be sure that you will come up with a conclusion that Maqasid Sharia is a legitimate source and a legitimate framework that a faqih has to engage in it. And this is, I think, it was a brilliant idea from a main contribution for Imam Shatibi, which is the first Imam trying to justify scientifically that Maqasid is a part is a full part of Sharia. So let's summarize here, because Imam Shatibi is considered the Imam of Maqasid Sharia. He's the first one who, in his book Muwafaqat, he tried to put together a complete framework, not only a part of it. First Imam who considered in a very specific way that objective of Sharia is a part of Usul Fiqh. First Imam who considered that an independent deliberator, a mujtahid, has to have a significant knowledge of maqasid before he can issue an opinion. First Imam who tried to find a scientific way to deduct the objective of Sharia, as we said, by manhaj al-istiqra', using manhaj al-istiqra' by going through the text, the Quran and Sunnah. And first Imam who adopted a scientific methodology of maqasid that focus on trend and sum totals and not just limited to isolated situations. And the first contribution was very important because for the first time, objective Sharia is a part of Usul al-Fiqh, is part of the framework that most scholars will be using. And I think that was his major contribution. So Shatibi was the last Imam of maqasid in the early Islamic history. But the discovery of his book Al-Muwafaqat reignited the field in the 13 Hijra years after 6 centuries of stagnation. Moving forward to the 13th century, where scholars Muslim from Tunisia, from Zaytuna University, and from Egypt, from Azhar University, they discovered the book Muwafaqat, and the 13th century have seen the printing of the book of Muwafaqat in Tunisia and in Egypt. As I said, there was a great interest by Tunisian scholars from Zaytuna University about the book. They were excited about it. And the book was well studied and thought. In the 1930, there many papers have emerged on Maqasid. And Imam Ibn Ashur, he was one of the illustrious scholars that put forward this book of Muwafaqat of Shatibi and tried to build on it. So Muhammad Abdullah Draz, this is one of the his contribution was to edit the Muwafaqat for Imam Shatibi and to make it available in the Islamic world. Muhammad Abdullah Draz is an Egyptian born. He's studying in Azhar University. He learned French and he went to study philosophy in France. And he spent 12 years in France. And one of his contribution is to study Islamic approach to morality or to ethics, which is he will try to make it part as a part of Maqasid Sharia. His thesis was La Morale du Coran in French, or Akhlaq al-Quran, or the ethics of Quran. And Abdullah Draz, he pushed forward the Maqasid a little bit forward when he said that Maqasid al-Maqasid, which is the objective of the objectives, are the from the Islamic perspective are the ethics, and that's what his main contribution and his thesis, PhD thesis that he did in Sorbonne in France in the 1947. So coming back to Muhammad ibn Ashur, the second or third Imam of Maqasid, and Imam ibn Ashur, born in Tunisia, he joined Zaytuna University, Islamic University, in 1892. He has a career shaped by cultural and political current in his time, and of course he lived in the French occupation that influenced him big time. He was admitted to Zaytuna in 1892, where he studied with some of the most eminent ulama at the time. And Ibn Ashur, he was considered as a reformist in the movement that was started in the early 1900s by the eminent scholar Muhammad Abdu, the Egyptian Muhammad Abdu. He has many positions in Tunisia, including head of judges, head of Mufti of Malikis, Sheikh al-Jama'ah, and head of Zaytuna for 2 terms. So Tahir ibn Ashur, he really revolutionized the Maqasid Sharia. He revived it first by adopting the Muwafaqat books in his studies, in his curriculum in Zaytuna University, and also by his many contributions to the science. So Muhammad ibn Ashur, he was the first to call for Maqasid as a new science and started working by writing his book of Maqasid. So he's the first one who wanted to have a Maqasid of Sharia as a separate science from the other Islamic science as Usul Fiqh. He wanted a separate science. Although it's believed to may have gotten exposed to others, big scholars from the famous Indian Shah Wali Allah Dahlawi, and also Muhammad Abdu in Egypt. And he reiterated that what the Shatibi talked about, that an independent mujtahid or deliberators must know Maqasid rules and must know how to apply them. And he also described in his book the area of ijtihad, how ijtihad, he revives ijtihad. So Ibn Ashur work on Maqasid, I think he has many great contribution to this science. He's the first one who called Maqasid as a new science, and that was a very important thing because he wanted separate from Usul al-Fiqh, because other ulama, they were mixed into Usul al-Fiqh. He wanted as a separate science, standalone science that to be developed and to be worked on it. And I think that's one of his major contribution. As I said, he was the first one who put Maqasid in Zaytuna University, and he was teaching it in the university. Yeah, I think he was the first one who did that as a big imam. He also he in his book when his thesis he talked a lot about al-waqf, how al-waqf is a great interest for or a maslaha for the Muslim Ummah, or trust money. So he went in big length how the waqf or trust money is a benefit for the Ummah. He also had another contribution, which is he added a new aspect or new concept to Maqasid Sharia from the classic ones that we know are the 5 necessities. He added freedom and equality, al-adl wal-hurriya. And I think this is one of the major contributions of Imam Ibn Ashur. The other contribution of his work on Maqasid, as we said, he was the first time that he studied comparing the role of Usul al-Fiqh and comparing to Maqasid. Because as we saw, most of other Imams of before him, they were considering Maqasid as part of Usul. And he first one who's trying to dissociate between them and make sure that Maqasid is separate science, standalone science. He also talked about interest and harm and summarized what Al-Izz ibn Abd Salam and Imam Qarafi and Shatibi have said. He also added a very good, very interesting aspect to it, because most of them they were talking about individual interest and harm. He's the one, the rare one that who's talking about Ummah community interest and harm. And I think that was another innovative aspect to what Imam Ibn Ashur contributed to Maqasid Sharia framework. As an example, Ibn Ashur emphasized that protection of the community and the preservation of its might and prestige is one of Maqasid Sharia, one of Maqasid Sharia, to preserve the community. So one of the sheikh, one of the scholars, eminent scholars that lives still among us is the Sheikh Abdullah ibn Abiyya. He's a Mauritanian descendant. He has many contributions to the Maqasid Sharia science. One of his contribution, he mentioned 30 applications of Maqasid in Usul Fiqh. And again, there's this relationship between Maqasid and Usul Fiqh. And he said that without Maqasid, Usul Fiqh cannot be functional and cannot be efficient for to make a sound judgment in this Islamic science. And he has many followers and many students that trying to follow his footsteps today. Another great contributors, Dr. Jamal Din Atiyah, he passed away. Jamal Din Atiyah, main contribution, he tried to find more application of Maqasid in the different categorizations that traditionally there were. And I think he was one who, for example, he cited Maqasid of creation, Maqasid al-Khalq, creation of a human being. He said noble Maqasid or Maqasid Sharia al-Aliyah, general Maqasid, personal Maqasid, specific Maqasid, component Maqasid. So he broke up from with the traditional categorization of Maqasid to a new aspect of Maqasid in this 6 categorization we just saw, and he trying to find more aspects of Maqasid from the Quran and from Sunnah in a different categorization. And I think that was his main contribution to this science. Another contributor, Dr. Ahmed Rissouni, and we had the pleasure to have him last week in our series. Dr. Ahmed Rissouni is a Moroccan born, and his main contribution is he has a thesis about the theory of higher objective based on Imam Shatibi. His PhD was the theory of higher objective and intent in Islamic law based on Imam Shatibi book, The Muwafaqat. And this book is been translated into English and French. So Dr. Ahmed Rissouni is credited for popularizing this science into the undergrad for universities in Morocco and outside of Morocco. And he's been a big advocators of this science in all his lectures and speech everywhere in the Islamic Ummah. So we will have the pleasure to see Dr. Jasser Auda next week. Again, is a young gentleman that Egyptian born and is a Canadian citizen now, living in Canada. And he's executive director of Maqasid Institute, which is registered in the United States, United Kingdom, and Malaysia and Indonesia. He's always scholar of Islamic law, in particular the study of higher purpose of Maqasid of Sharia. He has written many books about this subject. And again, he's another a great contribution to the science by trying to find a new framework of a new aspect of Maqasid Sharia and how to apply it into fiqh and usul al-fiqh. And I think, inshallah, we'll see him next week. That way he will expose us to his new framework or his innovative framework about Maqasid Sharia, new aspects of Maqasid Sharia, and next week, inshallah. So, of course, the list that we saw was not an exhaustive list. We have many contributors, great contributors of our scholars and ulama through the history. And starting from the 1900 with Imam Muhammad Abdo, Halal Fasi from Morocco, Sheikh Abu Zuhra from Azhar from Egypt, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, we all know him. Tahir Jabal Alwani, he passed a few years ago. He has major contribution too with moving forward with Maqasid Sharia framework. We have Abdul Majid Najjar, Kamil Hashimi, Ismail Al-Hassani, Muhammad Salim Al-Awa, Yusuf Hamid Al-Alam, and Kamal Al-Din Imam, and many, many others that we cannot list them all here. With that, I stop here, and thank you very much for listening, and we'll open the floor to for discussion and Q&A.
Just I will take one moment here just for the people to to summarize. Thank you, Hisham, for the kind of exhaustive work that went through different station in the evolution of this science as human kind of experience and knowledge, kind of debating and moving from implicit and tacit science that a lot of companion and scholars use it implicitly to the point when it starts to be formalized by many movement. It's not only in the Sunnah, even in the Shia, Ibn Babawayh, for example, he started even before Juwayni, or even in Juwayni for the Sunnah. So it was kind of effort coming from different movement in the Islam as a religion. And then we start looking at those three levels, which is the necessities, the needs, and the preference. Then between in the level of the necessities, we start having maybe in the beginning 5, and then Qarafi came and says, oh, maybe 5 is not enough. Let's put another one, which is the honor, which is al-ard. Then al-Ghazali came after him and says maybe al-ard can be encapsulated in the nasl, and so on. And even Shatibi came after to argue about do we really need to add it or not. All that stuff coming to the Ibn Ashur, where he start looking at all those maqasid and says, or maybe there is higher level, which is a maqasid of the khalq, maqasid of this creation, which is based not only on the text as itself, but on the general purpose of having human being here in the earth and having all the religions all together. And when they summarize them in the al-fitra, al-samaha, al-musawat, wal-hurriya, which are these 4 principles. Al-fitra is the human nature, the clean nature of the human, how he can evaluate what is the urf and what is the munkar, what is accepted and what is not accepted. As-samaha is it a rifq, and how you want to deal with anything with simplicity and easiness, not with the hardship. And al-musawat is the equity, and the hurriya is the freedom. And he encapsulates them as the higher level of all the objectives. Even the daruriyat al-khams, or the 5 necessities and hajiyat and so on, are coming as an essence to make these concepts explicit in our life. And then we start having other way for scholars, starting from people that start specializing the maqasid in specific area, like Al-Fasi, specializing it in the politic and siyasa shari'ah and maqasid, and other scholars, when you start looking at it, to be not only encapsulated in the usul, but also extrapolated into the intellectual movement and the way we are evaluating, not only the way we are judging from the Sharia perspective. And that's really great. It's like this evolution and how it's keeping adding and removing and arguing. It's very dynamic kind of science. And thank you Hisham for the whole work. It was very big journey moving between all scholars. And as you said, inshallah, just we'll open the floor here. We'll encourage people to keep kind of asking and digging deep between all those elements. We already saw the hajiyat, the necessities, the needs and the preference at one point with Dr. Ahmed Risoni. We talked about it maybe in 2 seconds before. We saw the necessities, which is العقل, النسل, and so on, which is we talked about it at one point. So keep the questions are in the evolution and the history perspective. It's not the end of the science. It's still kind of moving and perspective are coming. And please go ahead with your questions. And if you want to intervene, just raise your hand, or if you want just to write your question in the chat, you're very encouraged, please.
Ahmed, can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Jazakallah khairan, Hisham, for this walk through the history of Maqasid from the time of the Sahaba and the companions, and you gave us some examples how they practiced Maqasid, although they didn't have a theory written, but they practiced in their life, and later on the scholars and the imams of Maqasid brought the theories together in concept. I just wanted to elaborate more on one of the examples you alluded to for the benefit of the audience. Imam Al-Izz ibn Abdul Salam, you mentioned that he indicated on Surah Nahl that there is a verse that encompasses all the benefit or interest of the ibad, of the people. And this came in his book قواعد الأحكام في مصالح الأنام, or shortly called as Al-Qawaid, كتاب القواعد. He say, I'm going to say in Arabic first, وأجمع آية في القرآن للحث على المصالح كلها والزجر عن المفاسد بأسرها قوله تعالى إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فإن الألف واللام في العدل والإحسان للعموم والاستغراق، فلا يبقى من دق العدل وجله شيء إلا اندرج في قوله إن الله يأمر بالعدل، ولا يبقى من دق الإحسان وجله شيء إلا اندرج في أمره بالإحسان. والعدل هو التسوية والإنصاف، والإحسان إما جلب مصلحة أو دفع مفسدة، وكذلك الألف واللام في الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي عامة مستغرقة لأنواع الفواحش ولما يذكر من الأقوال والأعمال. And Imam Al-Izz ibn Abdul Salam said that this verse is an encompassing verse. But the bottom line here is that Imam Al-Izz ibn Abdul Salam, in his book Al-Qawaid, he specialized in studying Al-Masalih, which Dr. Ahmed Risoni also dwelled so much in the lecture and in the Q&A session about what are the Masalih, and Masalih are everything that is good for humanity is counted as Masalih, and vice versa are the harms or mafasid. Jazakumullah khairan, Hisham.
Thank you, Sanordin. Just for the sake of people that they need the kind of at least close translation of the verse, verily Allah enjoins justice and to do good toward others, and giving help to kith and kin, and forbids all evil deeds and all that is not accepted and all kinds of oppression. He admonishes you that you may take heed. So that was kind of, and thank you, Sanordin, for the kind of going back to that point to clarify it. We have here a question for you, Hisham. Do you have any suggestion on books to read to get better assessment of utilizing Maqasid in current time?
I believe Yasser Auda, our next speaker, inshallah, he has a couple of books. They are translated in English. They have a beginner. They have Usul Fiqh for beginner, and here Maqasid Sharia, a beginner guide, and it's available
Amazon.
In Amazon and everywhere.
Yeah. And if you want to go dwell a little bit more in a little bit deeper, He has a Maqasid Sharia as a philosophy of Islamic law, a system approach. And I believe he will, he has a new book coming in. So these two books, I believe, especially the first one, Maqasid Sharia, a beginner guide, I think is a very good start for any one of us who wants to try to have more knowledge about this science.
Any question or comment? If you have any comment, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Go ahead.
Muhammad, Jazakumullah khair, barakallahu fikum for the nice walk through this history. And I had a quick question, and I'm not sure if this is the right time to talk about it, but maybe you've come across it while you're doing your research. Are you aware of any era of time when Maqasid has been the mainstream way of reaching fiqh opinions? Has it ever been institutionalized or adopted, let's say, by a level of a governing body, for example, right, of the Muslims, in the older history or in the modern history? And if not, what do you think the barriers are to adopting it?
Thank you, Hisham.
I think it's a great question. From my own knowledge and my own, I don't think so. It was in the era that when Maqasid Sharia was adopted, in a general way. I think mostly it was from scholar to scholar, and I believe one of the most hurdles for not Maqasid Sharia to be institutionalized, as you said, in my view, in my research, it was two things. First, it was the fiqh schools; they were dominant, and they were entrenched into the tradition of each school. For example, a Maliki school that used the maslaha or interest in their fatwa, on their opinions, they will not accept, for example, to use istihsan, which is the from Imam Abu Hanifa school. I think that was the main from my research. That was one of the main obstacles to have a broader standard, which is Maqasid Sharia, to everybody be in it. But all of them were using it in a scattered way. But it was never institutionalized as far as I know, as far as my research went. Yeah. The second obstacle, I believe, it was the lack of tools to use Maqasid Sharia, because Maqasid Sharia was something a little bit unclear, and it was never has real tools to use it. So it was led to the Imam or Faqih to use his mind in it.
Yeah, just maybe two cents here before we move on. Thank you, Hisham. That's a great answer here. And same thing as you said, it's like the maturity of the science by itself. So the science, as it was institutionalized, it was not that ready to be used as substitute of the fiqh. Fiqh as tools was developed before that, and that make kind of this history precedence, and you have kind of first entrant in the field, so you have some privilege there, kind of thing between those two signs. And just I want to give Khalid said, you raised your hand. Please go ahead, Khalid.
Assalamu alaikum. I just have a few comments, a little bit, if you guys allow me. So, regarding the justice, there is a verse in Surah Al-Hadid, number 25. لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسَ بِالْقِسْطِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made the reasons to send messengers is us people to make the justice. That's one of the reasons that He sent messengers to this earth. And about the shara'i', it always has been different. Like Shariat Musa is different from Shariat Muhammad and Shariat Isa. But the thing that is common is always استجلاب المنافع والمصالح ودرء المفاسد والمضار. So each law in between prophets, they have different laws, but the common thing that they had is to bring benefits and interests and to get away corruption and harmlessness. And the thing that there is too many examples that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. For example, he forbidded to sell the dates in dates, and then he allowed it. And during Khaybar, for example, he prohibited from eating the donkeys, himar al-wahshi, because they wanted it for transport. But then the Sahaba allowed this. So the school of Maqasid, it wasn't written, but it was there. And Umar bin Khattab, his geniusity comes when he violated in the Zahir the Nas for المؤلف قلوبهم, and then he told Abu Sufyan, in that era the Islam was weak, now Islam is strong. And the same he did في أرض السواد في العراق, and this is written in the book of Muhammad Abu Zuhra. So these things and other things that ضوال الإبل, Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن التقاطها, and then Uthman violated after الفساد بدأ. So the laws of Maqasid was there, and there is a beautiful said in the أحكام العدلية, it says لا ينكر تغيير الأحكام بتغيير الأزمان. So that's what I just wanted to give an extra comment, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير.
Thank you, Khalid. That's very interesting. Thanks. So here there is a question. Where do we go from here with these field directions and philosophical, legal, or religious, or other opinions? Can you go, Hisham, if you have any thoughts about that? Where do we go from here, kind of, with this field? It's like how it's. If I understand you, Qandusi, just stop me if I'm wrong here. Do you mean here in this question how this field keep evolving in the future as kind of moving to other fields? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Qanduz. I think any science has either even in non-Islamic sciences, which is math or biology or geology or any science, it's how much effort you put in, how much you need PhDs and graduate student to look at it and to work on it, and the general public to understand it. Because if the general public doesn't understand the science, it doesn't matter how much work it will be on it, nobody will use it. And we will see that, for example, one of the issues of Maqasid Sharia, and I think we have two sides in the Islamic world. We have the literalistic movement that just say, hey, we just read the text and we go with the text exactly as it is, because trying to understand it, you put your women desire into it. And there's the other side of the opposite side, which is they're trying to use Maqasid Sharia between bracket to come up with a new religion. And I think this where this science is trying to balance between the two, that without making sure that the basic of Islams are still there, but given this science what it needs to be applicable in our modern era. And you can see that Sahaba, for example, and Khalid has great examples about Uthman ibn Affan, for example, that they understood that, yes, things can change when the society change, and they were not violating the text. they were going with the spirit of the text, and that's what they understand, radiallahu anhu. So just in a nutshell, in summary, for any science to be applicable, you need effort, you need money into it, you need more research into it, and also the public. And maybe this forum is what we're trying to do, just to sell this science to us general public that they're not specialized in this science.
Thank you. Maybe just small addition here. We already see some kind of ijtihadat or some scholars that are coming with different framework. They are even questioning the framework of the Maqasid. And inshallah, Dr. Jasiri will be coming next week just to question the framework of the Maqasid and to put it in different order and look at it from different perspective, so that it has an aspect when the Maqasid kind of interconnect with other sciences, as systemic social studies or psychology studies or political studies. And there is the field where the Maqasid will not be only framed in the fiqh, in the ahkam, and kind of coming up with better solution than the limitation of the qiyas, which was kind of highlighted by Brother Hisham when for Dr. kind of bin Bia. He came up with 30 rules how the Maqasid can make even fiqh better. But it's not only about making fiqh better, it's making our judgments in reading the teaching of Islam while we are ruling in different organizations, dealing in different contexts, personal and collective kind of context. And we start seeing that the evolution of this field, it's promising. I mean, here I have another question from Nazif. Sorry, it's Muhammad. Are there factors, local or otherwise, that helped the Maqasid movement thrive where it did, or inhibit it where it didn't not? Thrive where it did, or inhibit it where it did not? Is it clear for you, Hisham, just to go from there?
So if I may clarify, Assalamu alaikum, Nazif here. I'm just saying that from the history, you can make a geographical path for it, or even periods in time when it got a bump, and times where it didn't really get that kind of bump. Is there like a trend that we can see that, okay, in this situation, Maqasid tends to thrive, but in this situation, the scholars are not so disposed to pursuing it?
Yeah. So for example, Imam Shatibi was the 8th Hijri from the Prophet Hijrah. And after that, the Maqasid didn't have any champion until the modern era. So really, when the Islamic world is in trouble, or there's less creativity, less innovation in the good sense, not innovation in the bad sense, in the sciences, and there's more research and more ijtihad, usually Maqasid is not a good field is not a thriving field. And we can see today, even today, still Maqasid is a marginal science yet. With all this effort of these great scholars, the main school of thought that is in our communities, in our masajid, is mostly the traditional fiqh schools that use just analogy, and which is, I'm not saying is bad, but it's not where Maqasid can thrive.
Can you go, Sinordin?
Yes, Jazakallah khairan. I have two comments here. One of area, just to continue the discussion about the question of Dr. Qanduz, where do we go from here? How can we develop this field? How can we use it? The intent of today's session, as Hisham described it nicely for us today, is to see that this field is an evolving field. that it's not a situation where scholars, early scholars, have closed the door on it, because even them, they developed it. They started with few necessities, and then Imam al-Ghazali completed to 5. Then Tahir ibn Ashur started evoking some other universal necessities. So one area of ijtihad for our scholars today, as they are interacting with hajiyat nas, with the need of the people, because Sharia should come to resolve people issues. Sharia should not be just sitting there independent from the reality of the people. We actually asked Dr. Ahmed Raisuni, and we've watched this, his answer on this last week, when we asked him about what other necessities can be evoked in this time. And he said, one of the big necessities that Maqasid Sharia should be highlighting is non-Sharia, non-Islamic education improvement. That is improving the primary, secondary education in the Muslim world, way behind the West when it comes to education. And for that, you have to build institutions. And so to achieve this maqasid, there's certain things you have to put in place. The other thing he said, that we need to produce specialists in different fields that are experts in their own fields and become a reference for the ummah on their area of specialty. The other thing he referred to is armament and the ability to defend yourself as an ummah. He said that if the whole world agree to disarm, then that's great. Then there is no need for the world to be racing for more weapon. But when the whole world is weaponized to the teeth, you cannot afford to be a nation that cannot defend itself. The other thing, the big one, that big necessity that could be added to the 5 necessities is the environment. And somebody may wonder why the early scholars did not talk about environment, the early Islamic scholars. And Dr. Raisuni said that's because their environment was great. Back in the days, the environment was not as abused as it is now. So the situation of global warming and all the havoc that's happening in the environment requires that this becomes a necessity, because without that, then the second necessity, which is the preservation of the life, become a jeopardy for everybody. So this is one of the points I wanted to make. That is one area of study for the scholars, is to add some new relevant necessities for us to focus on. The second point I wanted to make here is that the field of Maqasid Sharia have attracted interest of a lot of people, including secular, and who are not really interested in promoting the Islamic understanding, but they're actually coming from another approach. And so we have people who are misusing the maqasid intentionally, and other maybe misusing it unintentionally. And I'll just give an example of a person that is active in this field, a Tunisian author by the name of Nuruddin Bouthuri. He wrote a book by the name entitled Maqasid Sharia. And so he's very focused in the whole topic of Maqasid Sharia and Ijtihad. He has a book by the name التشريع الإسلامي المعاصر بين طموح المجتهد وقصور دراسة مقارنة نقدية للاجتهاد. So Maqasid could be abused in our area, but this could be true for any Islamic study. So we should not use this, because many scholars come and say, see, that's why we should not promote Maqasid, because people are going to abuse it. Well, Quran, tafsir of the Quran could be abused if you don't know what you're doing. And Imam Shatibi actually referred to this fact. Imam Shatibi said, استدل أهل التثليث بالقرآن فقالوا الله تعالى يقول إنا نحن نزلنا الذكر وإنا له لحافظون، فمعناه أنه ثلاثة لأن أقل الجمع ثلاثة، وهكذا القرآن يتحدث مرارا بصيغة الجماعة. إذن هذا دليل على أن الأمر يتعلق بثلاثة وليس بإله واحد، تعالى الله عما يقولون، أو كما قال الإمام الشاطبي. So Imam Shatibi is showing how even the understanding of the Quran could be misused by some people, but that doesn't mean we should not contemplate and learn tafsir of the Quran. So this type of people that are using maqasid to undermine Sharia, right? They say, well, there's certain rules of penal rules in Islam that are no longer relevant, and we should annul them. So that's not the intent of maqasid, is to annul Sharia. Maqasid is seeking the benefit of the people wherever it's found. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you, Sanoudin. Any comments? Can you go ahead?
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah.
Thank you for the talk and the explanations. And I just want to mention something. You just actually made my point by talking about the verse that Allah has revealed the Quran and is responsible for its protection. Shouldn't that give Muslims some kind of insurance or assurance that they shouldn't worry about anybody trying to give interpretations or whatever, and they should just move on with working on like I was asking about where do we take this from now on. Just work on the concept of maqasid and develop them using modern knowledge, philosophy, psychology, all those fields of knowledge that you could use. And I like the idea that maqasid could be philosophy of law in Islam. So, but that needs further development from jurists and philosophers and all those scholars in those fields. So why do we still try to convince some people that it's a legitimate field to go to study the maqasid? We should really get beyond that aspect, and because there will always be somebody who would try to stop you. So, and you just mentioned the example of environment, and that it wasn't an issue back then. So if we were following all those people who naysayers, they would just, we would never start or this Islamic stance on environment or bioethics or any of the issues. So why are Muslims always obsessed with the ta'sil, the fundamentals, looking for in history for precedents for whatever they are trying to do instead of just going ahead? Why do we have always to go back and look for legitimation for something that should be taken for granted for normal life? We live in life, we deal with all the kinds of problems, new and old, and why do we always have to go and look for justifications? That has always bothered me, I hate to say, in many of respected scholars as well. They should just move on with their theories and their thinking, their approaches and their studies, deepen their studies and develop them. Just don't bother trying to justify whatever you're doing. If we keep justifying, which is another word for ta'sil, we will never get anywhere. and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you. That's very kind of relevant point. We already know a lot of books that are coming just to start talking about the numbers in the Quran, and it spend the half of the book that the numbers is not something evil. It's like, can you imagine it? It's like you can spend half of the book just to say that the number are not really evil if you're talking about them, and there are books like that. And we know this is kind of the issues that where we have this stagnation in the Islamic history, where they are kind of dwelling, not producing kind of the knowledge. As we are looking at this Maqasid field, and we feel that this is the bridge that give you the validity to move on from literalistic reading of the text to some human rationality of using your ability as a human to move your understanding and to challenge your context. And this is what Maqasid bring here. It bring you that's the tools. And if we start understanding that the Maqasid bring us the tool to be human, not to be that religious that gets stuck on some letters and some setting of that the early people, it's the Maqasid that can liberate people. And we are bringing it here from this perspective to question, why we are stuck? All the Maqasid is coming from the field and from the scene of Allah. And already we have this verse that was already cited by Dr. Nordin, or the other verse, خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. So show forgiveness, enjoying what is good, and turn away from what is foolish. What is good? It's good. What is good from human? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to the people, please take care of your good. And that's kind of, this is kind of obstacle. And I think, as to give some perspective here, I don't want to exaggerate on the kind of catastrophic understanding of the situation, is how we can move on. It's by moving our way to question the religion as public, as worshipper, as believers. It's like if we enhance our level to start questioning the religion and the way it's interpreted by the scholars, it pushes a little bit farther how this Maqasid can come into the plate as a tool. If there is no push the farther on that, the fuqaha or the scholars get in their comfort zone and still kind of dwelling in their verses and all that stuff. And this is our role. Our role as believers and worshippers, or at least as Muslim, is just to put the question moving forward, how we should be interpreted Islam, how we should be elaborated, how we should be integrated in many fields. We don't want just somebody come, oh please start from the end before thinking about the means. It's obvious why we need to talk about it that way. But this is the way that our role should not stop on just listening to and consume what's coming from them. It's just to go a little bit beyond and to come up with our own question. And don't forget that Khawla, by her questioning the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed new verse and new opening and new easiness for the human being. And by questioning, this is kind of a rule. This is as example. By questioning, you are moving the field to be more practical. You are moving to the maslahah and the benefit to come in hand for people. Now the maslahah, it's all theoretical and not even practical for now. And even whatever he's talking about something is obvious. And we need just to move on beyond what is obvious and to start touching what is the kind of real question, what is the radical, and come into the bottom by some level of depth and move on in our life. That's my comment. And thank you.
Ahmed, can I just give my 2 cents on this?
Yeah, just we want to stop in 2 minutes. Please make it short, please.
Just back to Mustafa and why we are finding ourselves that we have to explain every time and give a ta'sil. I mean, as any good scientist when you do, and I'm not saying that that this is required every time, but when you're trying to approach something from a scientific perspective, you do the search of the literature and you do the background, right? And so the intent of this, one of the intent of this series, is first to bring this science to the masses, because a lot of people, they don't know. And so that is the first thing, to bring this science to the level of the masses. There are people who are actively innovating in this field, but what actually got a lot of Maqasid scholars to spend a lot of time promoting the field and explaining it to the people is that over the last 30 years, we've seen a revival of the literalistic read of the text and practice of the text, which created a havoc in the Islamic world. A small minority school of thought have dominated the discourse, even in the West, to the point where people have started to believe that this is how the Islamic mind works. And so it took a lot of reality incidents for us to start waking up and figuring out that this literalistic Dahiri approach to understanding the text is dangerous. And we've seen the kind of extremism it created and the kind of deviation from the intent of Sharia. And so when you have a period of the history that people are deviating, it's worth it to remind people about what is the intent of Sharia and just to refocus them. But there are a lot of projects, and inshallah next week, Dr. Jasir Auda is gonna propose his framework for studying Maqasid Sharia and applying it. There are a lot of projects on the ground that are using Maqasid without talking about Maqasid. And I think one of the problems we're having today is that the scholar of Sharia are not working close enough with the specialist in the field so they can tackle the matter from a Maqasid perspective, working together. I mean, one of the examples that have to do with the pandemic cases we're doing these days, somebody asked the fatwa group to give an opinion, who should we prioritize in saving in ICU during the COVID pandemic, an older person or a young person? And the answer that was given by this group of mashayikh was really very disappointing. The field of bioethics and medical ethics have gone a long way that the Sharia scholars have no clue. And I think they should humble themselves also and learn these things so we could work together with the specialists, whether it's a medical issue or sociology issue or psychology issue. Sorry for dwelling, but I just wanted to give my 2 cents there. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you. Thank you. Still, it's a good point that Brother Mustafa is keep raising. It's not a reason to justify. That's a good comment, and I thank you about that. Can you move on to the next slide? Just inshallah, we are wrapping up here, and just I want to go to what is coming this Thursday, inshallah. So as case study, inshallah, you still kind of studying kind of Maqasid from historical. This is kind of a general view about Maqasid. And as we are tackling this Maqasid as general view, we are bringing case studies as general concern, and they have kind of a general concern so far. And they are related on if there is Maqasid, so what is the Maqsad to have catastrophe in our life as a human being. That's kind of thing. That's one of the big arguments that we see in our whatever atheist movement and debate and argument. And we need to have this awareness that if there is a maqsad, we want to know about it. If there is some understanding that we need to get there and having it. So that case study will go to that one as one topic. The second topic, it will be kind of this pandemic, and we all saw the debate in all religion altogether, Christian, Jewish, and Islam. At least this is Ibrahimi religions, when they are kind of dwelling, oh, this is trials, or this is punishment, and a lot of scholars went with the punishment in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then they kind of convert themselves and so on. So this is kind of the issue of not clarity of this issue of this phenomena in our thinking, in our way we understand, in our way we deal about that. And we don't want to keep our eyes closed, and we need to bring into the surface our questions and to deal with it, and we're facing it, either we have answers or not. And the last kind of items that we will be dwelling with it, inshallah, in this case study, it's more about the responses of religion in dealing with their internal affairs. It's like in dealing with location of the worship, or dealing with the rituals, how they are dealing with them, if they require some level of grouping of people and so on. Tarawih is coming, Ramadan is coming, Hajj is coming, and all that stuff. We'll have kind of view. We already talked about it a little bit, and it will be kind of getting there a little bit with more details. Inshallah, we are inviting kind of panel. Inshallah, we'll manage it a little bit different this time. We have kind of 3 intervenants in our panel. We have Khalid Saad at one point, and we have Sheikh Navid. He's willing to come and contribute, inshallah, at one point, and we have our brother Hisham. He's contributing on the responses of religion, inshallah, at one point. And thank you for that. And it was great having you today, and was great discussion too. Thank you, everybody, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.